This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
You're listening to In Your Opinion, a podcast series by the Straits Times. I'm Ernest Lewis, the podcast editor. The Forward Singapore exercise began in June 2022, and over 16 months, more than 200,000 Singaporeans from all walks of life have taken part in engagement sessions on a wide range of topics. The engagement exercise ended with the Forward Singapore report released end October 2023. The report reflects Singaporeans' collective aspirations and shared understanding of our roles and vision for the future. Today, about 14,000 families with children who live in public rental housing are supported by the Community Link program in housing, employment, and education. ComLink for short started in 2019. It's a program to support lower-income families in all HDB towns with a focus on those living in public rentals with children under 21. As Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong explained, when he unveiled the 180-page Forward Singapore report on the 27th of October.
Certainly those who have done well in society should do more to contribute and give back to our fellow citizens and uplift those with less. Indeed, many participants in this exercise shared a desire to rethink success and the Singapore dream. Success is not just about chasing our own individual goals or material goals. It's also about a sense of fulfillment and meaning, and about contributing to a larger purpose and the common good. In other words, we truly succeed only when we succeed together. And that's also how we uphold a strong spirit of solidarity and trust in Singapore.
In this episode, we'll look at how the existing ComLink program will be boosted following the Forward SG final report. This podcast is brought to you by the Ministry of Communications and Information in support of Forward Singapore. In the studio, we have three guests. First is Mr. Manas Gupta, a ComLink volunteer befriender who conducts home visits to help families in need of community support. Glad to have you on the show.
Glad to be here.
Next, we have Mr. Malminderjit Singh, who used to be on the Financial Assistance Scheme himself and now volunteers with a foster home and is also on advisory boards related to community support. Thanks for joining in, Malminderjit.
Thanks, Enes.
And finally, we have Mr. Lim Teck Kiat, a policymaker, a representative from the Ministry of Social and Family Development, who is here to reveal more about an announcement on ComLink Plus. Great to have you with us.
Hello, Ernest. Thanks for having us.
Okay, let's start off the discussion. Manas, you're on the ground as a ComLink volunteer befriender. How has the reaction been like from the families that you help?
It's been quite nice, actually, and quite warm, much more warm than I expected it to be.
How many years you been doing this?
I'm still quite new, actually. So I started volunteering, actually doing the home visits since the start of this year. So since January. So I'm about 10 months old.
Right. Yeah. So how do you find the reaction from the family? Anything that stood out for you?
Before I actually did my first home visit, what I wasn't really sure about was, how receptive would the families be to someone like me, a stranger coming into their house for the first time, asking them to open up and share their problems and, just tell us about their life. So if someone were to come to me, I would be apprehensive as well. But to my surprise, the families were actually quite, willing to open up, quite welcoming. In about 2 to 3 visits, actually, it was a very good rapport that was going on. And so after 3 visits, it didn't even feel like, I don't know the families or the families don't know me. So the kids are all saying hi. I'm saying hi to the kids. We are having a good time and we're going and we're just chatting and we're just taking off from where we left off the previous time. So I think that part was really quite nice for me. And, it's always like a highlight for me as well. Whenever I do a home visit to just interact with families, it's like kind of like just meeting friends. So I think that warmth was what I didn't anticipate, but it was really nice.
What made you decide to sign up for this as a volunteer befriender for ComLink?
Yeah, so I think just like towards the end of COVID, I just wanted to do some volunteering. And so I went on the volunteer.sg page and I was looking for different volunteering opportunities. And this befriending opportunity really struck out to me because I personally enjoy these kind of opportunities where you have a long-term engagement with the client or the family. And with befriending, that was a very unique volunteering scheme, unlike the others, which were like slightly more one-off. This was a prolonged, engagement. And I personally like to get to know people more and interact with them more. So this opportunity actually enabled me to do that. So I signed up for it.
Okay, nice. Malminderjit, you used to be on the financial assistance scheme, right, yourself? And how do you think this was crucial in shaping your life?
Well, very actually, Ernest. So this was 1991 when I went to secondary one. I went to an independent school, and that was the very early days of independent schools in Singapore. So obviously the transition, from paying regular school fees in primary school and then paying school fees at a much higher level for independent schools was something that my family at that point in time, it was difficult for them to sustain. My household income at that point in time was about $1,000 a month. And at that point in time, the school fees for independent school, which I was going to, was about $200 a month. So imagine paying 20% of your household income just for school fees. That was not possible at all. So thankfully, the vice principal of that particular school came to know about my case. I was already reviewing whether I should join that school or join another school. She came to find out about the case, led me and pointed me to the direction of the MOE Financial Assistance Scheme, helped us apply for it, and, I got it. And because of that, I got to spend, my whole secondary school education in the school, which I think was a huge turning point for me. Because I think what was very important for me was that being one of the lower income students in that school, where a lot of my classmates were from much upper levels of stratas of society, gave me the ability to dream, because it showed me that there was a world out of the world I was used to, right? I'm used to the, in my 3-room flat that I lived in, playing with my neighbors on a day-to-day basis, but there was a lot more out there.
Were you an only child? Or?
I was the only child.
Okay.
So there's a lot more out there that I was not familiar to, not exposed to. I got to go to some of my classmates' houses whose, where their servants' quarters were bigger than my own flat, right? And I was like, wow, how is this even possible in a place like Singapore?
Yeah.
But what that made me do was it gave me aspirations. It allowed me to dream. We talk a lot about how people should dare to dream. And I think as a society, we do that quite well in Singapore. We give people the tools and the ability to dare to dream. But we should also create and put a bit more effort into, helping people know what they should dream about. What is that end goal that they should aspire to? And I think that's something that, people from the lower stratas of society sometimes struggle with, because you're just so isolated from everyone else, that your aspirations are much lower than you like.
And I guess you reaching out, and there are people around willing to help, right?
Yes. I think what was really instrumental for me was that I had people around, not just in school, but people around in my wider social networks, particularly in the Sikh temples that I visited. So people in my own community who were people who were role models without them even realizing it. These were people who had done well, who had similarly come from more difficult backgrounds, but had done well in their careers through education or whatever not. And just, looking at them gave me the ability to say, look, if they can do it, so can I. And so I think my message out there is that today, anyone who has done well for themselves, all you need to do is just to have a conversation with somebody who's less, doing less well off than you, because you don't know where that conversation will take that person and how you might inspire someone.
For low-income families, right, what do you think they are really looking for? And how important is self-reliance, or even, a sense of dignity?
No, I think that is very, very important, Ernest. Of course, there are short-term challenges, with cash flow problems and all. I think that, in Singapore, we have a lot of schemes, to do that. And I just read recently about DPM Lawrence announcing some enhancements to the ComLink scheme as well. So I was quite heartened to see that those enhancements that he announced were not just monetary and financial, but also in terms of, looking at a broader toolkit and helping out families, because I think that's very important. I think what's useful is that, quite often we focus on the short-term financial needs of these families, but really what moves the needle in getting them out of that rut or that situation they're in is the education of the children. That is one thing that is a huge lever, and I speak from my own experience. That's what really helped my family and I see that in many other families as well. Invest in the education of the children, which the family themselves at that point in time sometimes struggle with. So I'm glad to see that the ComLink scheme now will have coaches in place to help families more customized, I think that could be very crucial in, helping the kids of those families see light at the end of the tunnel and say, look, this is what you got to do to get there.
Take it. What were the main points your ministry teams learned from the Forward SG sessions? Yeah.
One key learning point from our public engagement sessions is that there's broad consensus amongst Singaporeans that everyone can contribute and do their part to uplift lower-income families, even as the government do more to provide assurances. This sort of affirm our social compact as one that is a balance between individual and shared responsibilities. Families have agencies and want to chart their own paths. While individual responsibility is important, sometimes families do face difficulties that are hard to overcome. So therefore, families can benefit from more government and community support that recognizes and supplements their efforts without erasing their agency and self-reliance.
So, as we've heard from Malminderjit's experience, the help has always been around there. I think that's the good thing about Singapore's system, I can safely say. It's just that whether people want to reach out and sometimes also whether the families can get past initial, shyness and maybe ask for help. But of course, it's about improvements to the system as we speak in recent years. So what are the details that we can expect from this upcoming ComLink Plus program, especially after the final Forward SG report?
What we are ultimately after is families making progress in the journey towards stability, self-reliance and social mobility. So there are two main features under ComLink Plus. One, we will have family coaches to partner and coach families. They will be the consistent touch point for families. The family coaches will connect family to resources and co-develop action plans with families, taking into account their needs and aspirations. For example, if the family is looking for classes for their kids, family coaches can link the families up to suitable activities like swimming classes, reading classes, tuition programs that are run by our ComLink Plus community partners. Then if the family needs employment support, they'll be connected to WSG job coaches. So that's the first enhancement. The second enhancement under ComLink Plus, we will have packages that recognize and supplement families' efforts to improve their situation. So if families do their part in preschool enrollment and attendance for their kids, if they do their part to sustain a job, clear their debts, and save towards home ownership, they will get corresponding financial top-ups under the packages.
It's very different from your time, right, when you had the financial assistance. What's your reaction when you hear this?
No, it's great. Of course, things have evolved along the way. Today there's a lot more assistance, financially and non-financially as well. And I think it's a much better ecosystem and environment now than it was back then, 30 years ago. What I would add is that when we look at communities in terms of assistance, and that perhaps looks at the evolution of the self-help groups as well. They were initially very ethnic focused. From my own experience, and I mentioned this earlier about how I looked at some of the places of worship, where communities are. I think we should also look at how we can, reach out to people through religion as well. And I don't mean religion, like looking at religion per se, but, the places of worship, right? Because these are also communities. And sometimes, while these self-help groups have done a phenomenal job, there are still cracks, there are still gaps that need to be filled. And I suspect that if we reach out through the places of worship, whether it's through informal mentoring or even, using them as touch points to look out for people who need help, I think we could broaden the reach to a lot more people.
Find us on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or via the Google Voice Assistant and Amazon Alexa-enabled devices. And now back to our podcast episode.
Back to our conversation with our three guests on better community support in Singapore going ahead. This podcast is brought to you by the Ministry of Communications and Information in support of Forward Singapore. So, take it back to this question of financial support, right? It's tied to the progress of families. It seems a lot more focused now. How do you ensure this? It looks like the aim is to reduce all these gaps in early childhood development because a lot of the families hold themselves back, and that's not good.
Yeah, so before ComLink and ComLink Plus, families navigate challenges themselves. Many families approach social services touchpoints downstream only when they encounter challenges. So with ComLink Plus, the concept of prevention is better than cure comes into play. Family coaches partner lower-income families with children staying in rental housing units upstream even before these families approach social services touchpoints. The family coaches will celebrate mini milestones with families, journey with them over time on their action plans. The packages that recognize and supplement families' efforts further motivates families to keep up their progress. Also talk about your point on early childhood development.
Yes.
Because we know that research shows that early years are indeed critical to a child's development. Attending quality preschool can boost the children's confidence and social skills. Children who attend preschool from age 3 onwards are less likely to require additional learning support in primary school. Hence, we provide financial top-ups that recognizes and supplements the family's efforts when they enroll their children in preschool by age 3 and when they sustain good attendance. And of course, beyond preschool, we know that the home environment is also very important. This is why other packages support families to work, to clear their debts, and to save towards home ownership. These packages will strengthen the family's financial resilience and boost their social mobility over time.
So Manas, on that point about like early preschool, that intervention point now, the decision to do this much more systematically and more targeted. How do you feel about that? Is that good?
Yeah, I think actually like another very interesting thing about the scheme is like the long-term support. So what I see in some of the families is that, families get support, but they might be only for a few months. And then the support kind of ends. And then somewhat the families go back to where they were before the support was given. So for the case of early childhood education, right, like I have like some families where like kids need a bit more support. They have some learning difficulties which weren't properly diagnosed, and once they were diagnosed, it was brought to light that they need a bit more hand-holding, a bit more support. So I think these nudges and these schemes at that stage would be very useful for families which have these kind of needs. And similarly, like some even slightly older in the journey, even primary school students, I see some of the families that we spot, the kids need tutoring, outside of school tutoring, but and there are schemes available to tutor, but because of some other circumstances the family is facing, they're not able to get the tutoring that they need. So in that case, someone like a family coach who can kind of just step in a bit more and, really try to sort out all the things which are holding back the kids from getting that tutoring can be done. So I think those very targeted and long-term nudges would be quite helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's quite tricky when you expect the family to know what to do, reach out here, reach out there. So a befriender like you actually helps to link all the dots, right?
Yeah, so actually one of the main roles for a befriender like me also is to really help the family coach, because a family coach is a full-time employee. They have multiple households to take care of as well. Whereas a befriender like me has lesser households to take care of. So, we can actually devote more time and really keep track of all the issues that a family is facing. And we help the family coaches in that sense to get more regular updates and then update the family coaches on how things are progressing. As well as you said, like just bringing new ideas to the table that, it's the second pair of ears to think about issues and, voice out interesting ideas that maybe the family coach couldn't think of in the moment.
So actually, take care. What Malminderjit talked about, financial assistance is an important thing. Let's say there are potential donors, there are Singaporeans out there, maybe very busy in their lives, but doing well. They may not have the time to be a befriender, for example, like Manas, and they can help by donating financially. How would they do that if they're listening to this podcast?
Yeah, indeed. I think donors can contribute financially to the packages that support the family. So donors and volunteers who want to be befrienders like Manas, who has stepped up to serve the families, they can always contact MSF to contribute.
Okay. As simple as that, huh?
As simple as
to the website directly. Okay. Malminderjit, how can the community, right, how can they chip in more from now on besides just financial donations? In other ways, like you may not have that financial capabilities, but you are able to give like maybe other chances, mentorships or something.
So I would focus on 3 points here. First, as I mentioned earlier, is the need to improve interactions across stratas and classes of society. So if you think that you are someone who's done well or is doing well, and a less advantaged family, do take some time to talk to people from the family, especially the children. Like I mentioned, that goes a long way because you create a bond You help that child dream and aspire them, right? Which goes beyond financial assistance schemes, which goes beyond even formal mentoring schemes as well. Just that 15 to 20 minutes you take, whether you meet the person at a community event or community place, that 15 to 20 minute conversation, asking them what he or she is doing and giving them some advice and guidance as to how he or she could do better or the directions to take, that goes a long way from my personal experience. So do interact. I think that's something as a society we need to do better, right? The second point I would say is that I think businesses need to play their part as well. And this goes beyond just through financial assistance schemes. So today, many companies, particularly MNCs, have, strong volunteering programs, strong CSR programs. I think it's important that those are more targeted. And I would like to see more companies, including SMEs and startups, not just big MNCs, get involved in giving back to society through in-kind programs such as befriender programs like Manav is doing, mentorship programs, or even just, spending time with some of these youth. Why not get a day where some of these youth from less privileged backgrounds can spend 2 or 3 days, say, in a big tech company, for instance, where they're shadowing, staff from the big tech company. I mean, I would think that goes a long way in terms of, helping that child dream for his or her dream job in that tech company as well. So
even as something as simple like painting classes or extra hobby programs,
or even just a shadowing stint, like just a day in the life of a tech engineer, or a day in the life of a podcast host.
That's right. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. I need someone to help me call cables. Always need that. Okay, take care. Moving on, right? You mentioned this. You've explained to us what's coming up next in ComLink Plus, and one of the roles that's new is family coaches. We've talked about it a little bit. Who are these family coaches? Where do they come from? And are they all Ministry of Social and Family Development staff full-time? How does this role work? Yeah, maybe you can explain.
Yeah, so to each of the lower-income family, we engage them in a pair. One of the pair is actually a family coach, and the family coach is actually a MSF officer.
Right.
The other one is actually a community befriender, and this is where we encourage people from the community, whether you're from the corporates, whether they are individuals.
So someone like Manas?
Someone like Manas who has stepped up to serve can always partner a family coach and engage the families together.
Right.
Then the primary role of this pair is really to support the family towards stability, self-reliance, and social mobility. And we got to break it down what this means. Because what is stable, what is self-reliance, and what is social mobility for the different families is actually, it has to be customized and contextualized to the situation of the family. So for example, it could include securing a stable job. It could include resolving a family violence issue, or it could include addressing a healthcare concern. And ultimately, I think the family coach and the befriender will be co-developing an action plan with the family, breaking down the longer-term goals into manageable steps to achieve the goals. And we'll also organize support along the goals.
If I could just jump in here, Tekir, and one of the observations I had from my time volunteering through MSF, on the board of children's homes and young persons' homes, where a lot of the children come from, broken families, and are institutionalized in different homes. What I've at least anecdotally observed is that, when they first started out, some of them perform academically quite decently. But because of the attention and focus in, ensuring that these guys have a home or family to return to, sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes they are put in different foster homes. Could be an aunt and uncle who may have less of a vested interest in the upbringing of the child, but, it takes on the responsibility and gets a small little stipend for that as well, right? So the commitment obviously is kind of misdirected. Then you see the child's educational performance sort of deteriorate over time. My sense is that if we could just flip this around and rather making the focus of that help or assistance for the child to be a family and provide them a family, but to be more academically inclined and focused, and to say, look, can we get this child, or a group of these children and house them in a particular place where, the focus is really on academic performance. So that, because that will be that one lever, as I mentioned earlier, the one lever that will really get them out of this cycle.
Right. So that could be, up for consideration in future iterations of ComLink Plus, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So that means you're really targeting the educational focus of that.
Absolutely.
Rather than tying it to the foster
family or the household. Yeah.
Family, the household, yeah. Because you I mean, Manas, you know this, right? It's also quite something you have to coax the family to want to push the child in this, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the families anyway are going through so much, right? And when they get into a comfortable habit, they feel the inertia to change anything, right? You ask them to do anything, even though they understand that it might help them, they'll have that inertia. So you do need a bit of coaxing, a bit of long-term support, someone that they really trust to, for them to take that step and go out and make changes.
Take it. Are there any roles that if members of the public are listening in, they want to come on board to chip in, what are the kinds of roles that they can sign up for besides being a befriender and besides the chance to work alongside these family coaches from MSF? Yeah.
So members of the public can actually step up in two ways. One is to be befriender, like what Manas is doing. Another way is actually to sign up to volunteer with our ComLink programs. And under our ComLink Plus programs, I mean, we do have many partners running different programs, and some actually include the concept that I think Mel just mentioned, which is focus on academic. Some do it through providing tuition programs, some do it through a boarding school concept, but we have different partners stepping up to do their part to support and uplift lower-income families. So either as a befriender or as a volunteer with the various ComLink Plus programs.
Okay, good. We'll also have links to the various MSF programs in our podcast show notes. So Manas, just to cap off with you, right? I mean, volunteering alongside these new family coaches that we're going to be seeing in ComLink Plus, are you glad in a way to see that there's more support? You're going in a very targeted way because you are tackling the personal side of things. The family coaches will have a more systematic approach. Do you feel this is good for the future, for the next few years?
Yeah, I think, we have to roll it out, and we have to, of course, there might be some kinks in the implementation, but I'm really looking forward to it. I think I'm most excited about the long-term support that, these programs will offer, because that's one of the things I see on the ground that families don't have. So I'm really excited about that. And also, I think some of the officers that I'm working with already have that relationship where they have been with the family for very long, and they're already doing the family coach role. So I think it'll be great to see the implementation in also in any way that we as befrienders can help in it. It will be great. And I just look forward to continuing the home visits that I'm already doing and engaging with the families.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks very much for sharing your thoughts. Manas, great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Malminderjit, great insights from you. And thank you so much for sharing your early life stories as well.
Thank you, Anas.
And great perspective from you, Teked, as well, on the program that's we can look forward to help all Singaporeans here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us again.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode of In Your Opinion, a podcast series by the Straits Times. If you'd like to read our opinion columns and hear our Forward SG related podcasts, there are links in our podcast show notes. This final and fourth Forward SG related episode was brought to you by the Ministry of Communications and Information in support of Forward Singapore. Thanks for listening.
That was a podcast by the Straits Times. Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or via the Google Voice Assistant and Amazon Alexa-enabled devices. For more podcasts by the Straits Times, the Business Times, and Money FM 89.3, you can also download the Audio by SPH app. That's AWEDIO.